Welcome, and thank you for coming today. So, what is today going to be all about? Today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and leadership. What do you need to do on a personal level so that you or your business or maybe your department, perhaps your family can thrive? Don't get me wrong. I know that there are many great leaders in the room and that you have accomplished a lot. I am sure that I can learn a thing or two from you. And here's the great and. The moment that you stop growing marks the moment that you open yourself up to be vulnerable. Let me say that again. The moment that you stop growing, you actually start to contract. Let me give you a personal story. When I was in high school, I took a computer programming class. I hated it. I really couldn't understand the zeros and the ones, and then I vowed that I was never going to use a computer. Here we are, it's just a few years later, and I could not be without my computer. So think about that. For those of you who resisted technology, perhaps you were slow with emailing or texting, you really put yourself at a disadvantage. No matter how great you are, there's always a place where improvement will make a difference. Today we're going to look at those areas that involve emotions. We're also going to look at this oxymoron of making a rational decision. But for right now, I'd like you to think about some of the areas in your business, your professional life, that are challenging for you, such as having conversations with employees, or maybe the board, or perhaps even at home. How do you enroll your family into your professional life? You can also take a moment to look at some of the personal skills that are involved in being a good leader. How about procrastination or negative thinking? Some of us tend to micromanage when we're afraid and when we contract. Today's not going to be a depressing presentation. When we don't take a moment to look at the areas where we need to improve, we're going to have a hard time being a better leader. There's a famous saying, and it goes like this: simple awareness is often curative. With this in mind, I'd like you to have an open mind today. Give me your full attention, because today might just be a life-changing presentation for you. Are you ready? Yes, awesome. All right, so let's just jump right in. Raise your hand if you're always successful when you set a goal. No matter what your goal is, you're 100% successful. Okay, I see no hands up. Well, that is human nature. It's really impossible to be successful 100% of the time. After all, we're not robots. So let's start over. So raise your hand if you're usually successful. When you set a goal, most of the time you accomplish it. Great. Most of you in the room. One more time. Raise your hand if when you set a goal, this is usually in a particular area, as soon as you think about it, you know you're not going to accomplish it. Okay, let me give you some help. This is usually in the area of diets, exercise. Also, perhaps cleaning off that desk, going to bed early, calling a disgruntled client. Right. So there are some goals where we know as soon as we think about them, we're not going to accomplish them. Thank you for being honest. Without honesty, it's challenging to become a better leader. So sometimes it's obvious why we can't accomplish our goal. Maybe the goal was too big. Maybe there's no support. Sometimes there's a misalignment between your vision and who you actually are. But often we have no clue. And this is the area that I would like to explore today, that no clue area. And I'm going to assert that often the answers to the no clue area can be found in the unconscious part of the brain. We're also going to look at emotional intelligence and the brain and something called emotional hijacking. And then I'm going to spend some time showing you what I call the solution to improving your emotional intelligence and also reducing the phenomena of emotional hijacking, called neuro-emotional coaching. And then we're going to have some time for questions and answers and some takeaways. So let's just jump in. What is emotional intelligence? I looked at Wikipedia. Emotional intelligence, or emotional quotient, is the capability of individuals to recognize their own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different feelings and label them appropriately, to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, and to manage and/or adjust emotions to adapt to environments or to achieve one's goal. Let me be clear about a few things. So emotional intelligence has been around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. It was popularized by Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book in 1996 called Emotional Intelligence. But if you think about it, for most of our existence, human beings really had feelings. So it would only make sense that a good leader would be able to manage his or her emotions in a very powerful way. I'd like you to bring to mind a leader, or maybe a few leaders that you admire. What do you admire about him or her? Is it about what he does or what she does? Who he is? How she shows up? Take a moment to look at the way the person manages his or her emotions. As you take a look, you can see that emotions always play a powerful role. I want you to bring to mind Mother Teresa. When you think about her, what do you think of? Yes, she was a powerful leader. She was compassionate. She went to an area where nobody wanted to go. She was kind. She didn't really care so much about herself. She gave everything that she had. If you don't know about her, I encourage you to learn more about her. Early on, when she was a young nun, she really had to use her emotional intelligence to get what she wanted to do. She had to convince the people in the order that it was important to go into those areas where there was complete poverty. So let me summarize. Emotional intelligence is to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and it's to recognize, understand, and support the emotions of others. So in order to enroll you a little bit more into emotional intelligence and why it's important, I looked at some studies. There are many, many studies on the internet, and I pulled some from a very reputable company called Korn Ferry Hay. Here's what the study says. 92% of teams led by leaders with high emotional intelligence or high emotional awareness had high energy. So what does that mean when your team has high energy? They love to come to work. They don't mind staying extra. They're very productive. They're very happy. And a positive climate really adds to the bottom line. Vice versa, 78% of teams led by leaders with low emotional intelligence or awareness created negative climates. What happened when there's a negative climate? Usually people call off, they want to go home early, it's difficult for them to communicate with their coworkers, and the team really isn't productive. There was another study that said that division leaders with high emotional intelligence increased the bottom line by 20%. So I think it would be fair to say if a CEO or a head of department has high emotional intelligence, that he or she would really be able to be more effective. So early on, I talked to you about the oxymoron of making a rational decision. I want to talk to you about a book. It's written by Antonio Damasio, and the book is called Descartes' Error. In the book, he points out that it's impossible for us to make a rational decision because we need emotions to care about our decisions. The absence of emotions will cause us to be stuck and uncaring. And if you think about it, we really need emotions. You decide because you don't like something. You decide because you do like something. Or we're angry, we're excited. And so every decision that we make really has an underlying emotion that's associated with it. I have done some research, and I've looked at a variety of models that look at emotional intelligence. Plus, I've been taking my own experience of coaching for the last 20 years, and here's what I came up with. There are 5 elements to emotional intelligence. The first thing that I would like to do is just talk about the 5 elements, and then we can take a deeper look. The first element is awareness. I need to be aware of what's going on with me. The second is acceptance, accepting of what's going on. We move into understanding, management, and then taking action. Awareness. I need to become aware of what's going on. What am I actually feeling? Am I excited? Am I upset? Am I frightened? What's going on with me? Once I have a better awareness of what's going on with me, I need to accept it. Oftentimes what we like to do is we sort of like to sweep it under the rug. Many of my clients tell me that they just really don't want to deal with their emotions because it's not taking action. What's going to be the result of dealing with my emotions? It's not productive. I actually tell them that it's very productive to deal with the emotions and look at them. So after we are aware, we accept, we move into understanding. What is going on with me? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? I move into management. I need to manage my emotions better, especially in situations where I get triggered a lot. And then I take action. And taking action could actually mean that I take a break or that I excuse myself. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing something that will produce an outward result immediately. Let me give you an example. About a year ago, an executive from one of the largest banks in the world asked me to assist him. He had just received a bad performance review. All of the members in his team, his direct reports, went to his supervisor to complain about his leadership style. When John came to me, he was confused. He didn't understand why this happened, and he was worried about getting fired. After a few sessions, he became aware of what had happened. First of all, we looked at his emotions. He felt betrayed, he was hurt, and he felt that his supervisor really usurped his power. A few months later, he also understood what had happened to his team. His team felt that at times his leadership style was too aggressive. Sometimes it wasn't clear enough on what he needed, and so they were confused. Now, here's a sidebar. His direct supervisor's emotional intelligence really wasn't so high either, because he had allowed his team to come to complain to him. Here we are, a year later, and John was able to meet with the members of his team, and he was able to apologize for his leadership style or any mistake that he had made. And they were able to come together and be much stronger as a team. He was also able to go to his supervisor and neutrally request that the supervisor not manage his team, but when there were issues, that the supervisor would come to him directly. Just 2 weeks ago, John got his performance review, and his performance review was really strong. So you can see that John's coaching really involved emotional intelligence, and we really used the model to improve his emotional intelligence. And there was awareness. He had to become aware of what he was feeling, accept what he was feeling, which is not always that comfortable, and understand where it was coming from. That took a little bit of time. And then he had to learn how to manage those emotions and then take action, which resulted in him meeting with his direct reports as well as with his supervisor. I've talked a lot, so now it's time for you to talk. I want you to take a look at areas that are challenging for you right now. This could be either in the personal or in the professional end. And I put some examples up on the boards just to help you prime the pump. Are you struggling in sales? Is it difficult for you to be in business in general? Marketing, finance. What are some of the areas where you can see that emotions are involved? Examples would be, I really don't want to talk to my customers, my disgruntled customers, because they might walk away from me. I also don't really want to get some feedback from my customers because maybe it's so negative and it will make them realize that they should switch companies. For some of you, you have emotional issues with the people that you work with. I'm going to ask you to share some of those areas with your partner. Thank you for sharing. Most likely you had the answer to this already. Maybe sharing with your partner gave you a little bit more insight, but oftentimes knowing really makes no difference. Let me tell you about an IBM study. This study is about 10 years old. IBM looked at thousands of people that were struggling with life-challenging illnesses. And here's what they found. 90% of the people that were looking at death were unwilling to change their lifestyle. They didn't want to diet, they didn't want to quit smoking, they didn't want to start to exercise. Let me say this in another way. Only 10% of the people were actually willing to make a change. So what does it take for us to change? How do we improve emotional intelligence? Let me tell you about the brain. We're going to do some brain surgery. I promise it won't hurt, but it will be incredibly insightful for you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the brain. The brain controls everything about us. It controls your muscle movement, your breathing. It decided what you were wearing this morning, how you run your business, just simply everything. So I'm going to do this little brain surgery. I told you it wasn't going to hurt, but I want to talk about the 3 different parts of the brain. So the first part is called the neocortex. The second part is called the limbic brain, and then we have the reptilian brain. Let me tell you a little bit about each part. So the neocortex is the smart part of the brain. The smart part of the brain controls everything that has to do with rationalization, analyzing things, language. It's the only part of the brain that's conscious. What does that mean? That means we can control it. Supposedly right now, your smart brain, your neocortex, is listening to me, and my neocortex is producing words. Then we have the limbic brain. It's also called the emotional brain. The emotional brain produces, it's a biochemical chain reaction, produces all of your emotion. It also regulates our temperature. So have you noticed sometimes when you get angry, what happens to your body? Usually your temperature goes up. And when we're depressed or when we're frustrated, sometimes our temperature changes and we're cold. When we're worried, we get cold. So the emotional brain controls our emotions and our temperature. Now, the tricky part with that part of the brain is that it's right below the consciousness. What does that mean? It means we can't control it. If somebody tells you that you can change your emotions, you can tell them that it is not biochemically possible. Now, we can control or change our behavior once we feel something. But actually, emotions are biochemical chain reactions. They happen automatically. Last but not least, we have the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is that fight, flight, or freeze. I'm sure you've heard about this in the past. So the fight, flight, or freeze is really deeply embedded in our unconscious. We can't really control it. It comes up instinctively. Somebody says something, you meet somebody, and it will react. So when the fight, flight, or freeze is engaged, we're going to have a hard time executing on our goals. It doesn't really matter if the goals seem rational. If we're afraid or something doesn't line up, we're going to either fight, we're going to run away, or we're going to freeze. How many of you have children? Okay, a few of you. How about young children? Or do you remember when they were little? What happened when you said to them, honey, I want you to go to bed? They usually had a hissy fit, right? Why is that? Because in their world, their limbic, their emotional brain got triggered, and also their reptilian. Their day was over. That seemed a negative experience, a negative thing to them. And so they put up a fuss. Now, what do we usually do as parents? We try to rationalize with them why it's time for them to go to bed. We fail to recognize that it's really their emotional and their reptilian, their survival brain that is engaged. So what we need to do is we really need to address that. So the goal here is to get all three parts of the brain in alignment. When all three parts of the brain are in alignment, it's going to be that much easier for me to accomplish my goals. I have my smart brain saying yes, I have my emotional brain saying yes, and I have my survival brain saying yes. That is the best way for me to accomplish something. Thank you so much for coming up. I really appreciate it. Yes. Let me tell you a few more things about the brain. There's a fellow named Randy Flanagan. He's a professor at the Center for Neuroscience in Canada. And here's a quote from him. Humans are not particularly fast, we're not particularly strong, and we receive sensations about the world with considerable delay. What does that mean? Think about the tsunami. So about 10 years ago, when that occurred, the animals knew what was happening. They could sense that something bad was coming, and they went inland. Human beings, we had all kinds of detection methods. We really weren't prepared. Candace Pert wrote the book called The Molecule of Emotion. She is the former chief of brain chemistry section for the National Institute of Mental Health. She found out that every emotion that we experience is a biochemical chain reaction. I talked about this earlier, and I put up the slide so that you can see what's going on. Here's a quote from her. Emotions are neuropeptides attaching to receptors and stimulating electrical charge on the neurons. She also proved that these biochemical chain reactions are going on in our entire body. So they're not necessarily connected to the heart, but you can have an emotional response in your foot or in your knee. We might not be aware of it. Last but not least, we have the three elements of the brain. So what's happening all the time is that your brain is saying, what's going on right now? What's happening right now? What's my perception? Then the brain goes into the past and looks to see, what did you do in this situation in the past? And then based on the information that the brain has, the brain's going to generate it and it is going to put it into play. Let me give you an example. So let's say most of us have never come through this door in the back. So the brain says, okay, there's a door. We've gone through the door in the past. Was it a safe experience? Yes, it was. It will go into the data bank, look at what does the body need to do in order to go through the door. And then if it's a safe experience, then we will go through the door. Babies were not born afraid of elevators. Those are things that we conditioned into our system. I'm going to have you play a game. And the first thing that we need to do is we're going to pass out these toothpicks. There are 24 toothpicks in every pack. Please count them and let me know if you are missing a toothpick. How many of you cheated in school? Okay, if you're a cheater, I'd like you to sit in a corner, make sure that you are not looking over your shoulder to see what your neighbor is doing, okay? How many of you hate these kind of puzzles? You know, crossword puzzles. You think you're not smart enough. Okay, this is going to be difficult for you. Okay, so the first thing I'd like you to do is put this pattern up on your table. It's up on the board. I'm going to give you a minute or so to do it. So take your time. Make sure that you have it set up appropriately, properly. Okay, any questions so far? Good. Okay, so here's our tasks. Form 2 squares that do not touch by removing 8 toothpicks. Let me repeat. Form 2 squares that do not touch by removing 8 toothpicks. Any questions? Good. All right, so I want you guys to start all together. So ready, set, go.
Two existing squares.
Okay, so the smart ones have already gotten it. This really doesn't take more than 24 seconds to do the puzzle. Okay, so just stop for a second. Stop wherever you are. And if you completed the puzzle, great. If you would like some assistance, here are some specific instructions for you to get assistance. We're going to ask a group of people to come around the table. For those of you that are willing to provide feedback, to be the universe for that person, please gather around the table. And here's the kind of assistance that you're going to get. When you remove the correct version that contributes to the solution of the puzzle, you will hear a short burst of applause. When you remove a toothpick that does not contribute to the correct solution, this is what you will hear. So, who would like some feedback from the universe?
Laughing.
Because I don't know how to solve it. So
Start from the beginning.
Isn't the 8 so pencil?
Hold on, just be patient with yourself.
I can't slow.
Slow down. And then you put it back. Okay.
Not wrong, you whack him on the back of the head.
Okay, so thanks again. I really appreciate your participation. So this was the correct solution. I put it up on the board for you. And many of you actually got the correct solution. Now, I didn't give you specific instructions, so there are actually some other solutions. Here are 2 other solutions. And there was a guy from MIT who was really brilliant, and this is the solution that he came up with. 4 is 16. Now, I set you up. I really I tricked you. How many of you got a little irritated when I asked you if you are cheaters? Okay? You're like, why is she asking me that? And how about when I said this is a puzzle for smart people? What about when I said that you needed to hurry up to complete this game? And what about those of you that had the wrong solutions? Sorry, I intentionally set you up. I wanted you to get emotional about that game because I wanted you to have an experience of what we call getting emotionally hijacked. This is what happens to human beings. We are emotionally hijacked when a customer calls us up and says to us, Barbara, I'm sorry, that $1 million contract that I wanted to award you, we can no longer do that. We also get emotionally hijacked when an employee comes who's been with us for 20 years and they hand in their resignation. So every time when we have an intense emotional reaction that overshadows our behavior or our thinking, we are emotionally hijacked. I want to talk a little bit about things that you can do that will make it less likely for you to be emotionally hijacked. So here's tip number 1. Get enough sleep. The recommended hours for us to get sleep is about 7.5 hours. We sleep in increments of an hour and a half. So we have 6 hours, 7.5, 9. It's actually better to sleep only 6 hours than 6.5. We want to drink at least 2 liters of water a day. We are 70-some% water. And if we want our electricity, if we want our organs, if we want our system to work well, we really need to have enough water in the system. Eat a balanced diet. Now, for some of you, a balanced diet might look different, but it's really recommended that we have a lot of fruits and vegetables, that we lay off the carbs, that we watch our sugar intake, our caffeine intake. So on days where you're stressed, okay, you really want to, especially on those days, you want to lay off the sugar and the caffeine. Number 5, you want to enjoy time with your friends and family. I know oftentimes we make excuses. We don't have time. If you are an entrepreneur and you don't have a lot of staff, you do often everything. You do HR, you do compliance, and you do accounting. But it's really important that you disengage and that you recharge yourself and you recharge your battery and spend time with the people that you love and that they love you. Here's something that's very important. You want to spend at least 1 hour a day unplugged. And by unplugged, I mean away from your computer, away from your cell phone. And it doesn't count when you're sleeping. So this is to be intentional. 1 hour a day to be away from your devices and so that your system can really relax. I'm going to use the car analogy again. If you put the wrong gas in your engine is not going to run as well. And nobody would let their car run for 24 hours. It's like you need to shut it down, you take it to the shop, you do maintenance, and so that you can keep your car as long as you can. And I have number 7 on here, another category, because some of you, you go to church or you have a meditation practice or you journal. So there's other things that you can do that will help you to prevent emotional hijacking from happening. Those are some basic tips, and we all know it's not always that easy to implement them. I encourage you to pick one each month and see if it makes a difference for you. I want to take this a step further. So let's say I just I was emotionally hijacked. What do I do? And I am going to put up the 5 elements of emotional intelligence, just to remind us: awareness, acceptance, understanding, management, and taking action. So you can see that they're closely related to the 5 elements of emotional intelligence. I want to go through them, and I'm going to give you an example so you can see how they apply. Once again, we really need to admit that something happened. If I spoke to one of my customers and the customer says, "I'm sorry, I am no longer awarding the contract to you," I need to admit that I'm upset. And the second thing I might want to do is I want to explore a little bit, like, what's going on? What am I actually feeling here? I want to identify it. After I explore it, I really want to identify what my emotion is. And I want to own it. I don't want to sweep it under the carpet. I talked about this earlier, but a lot of us, we are so uncomfortable with feeling negative emotions that we do whatever we can so that we don't have to experience it. But I want to own it. I want to say, yes, I'm upset. I want to direct it, look at what do I want to do with that emotions, and then I want to resolve it in a positive way. Let me give you an example. This is a personal example, and I'm sure most of you who are business owners can actually relate to it. Recently, I had a client who didn't pay me. I was upset, and I was actually more upset than I wanted to admit. So I took some time to look at what was going on with me and realized that I was really taking it personally. So on further inquiry, I saw that this wasn't the first time that she had been funny with money. And I could see that I was feeling, I didn't feel like she was valuing the services. And I started to also questioning myself whether I was doing a good job or not. After I took some time to own it, and I directed it. And I realized that it wasn't good for me to take it personal, and I needed to find a way to talk to her about it. So I managed it by emailing her and asking her to set some time apart so that we could talk about the financial situation. I wanted to know if she was perhaps not satisfied with the services, or maybe she was struggling financially. I wanted to resolve it in a positive way. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been coaching for about 20 years, and when people came to me initially, I really wanted to provide value. People came, they wanted to change their behavior. We would set goals, and oftentimes, despite the fact that people really wanted to, they couldn't will themselves to change. This is a little bit about what we talked about earlier. We often know what we need to do, but we can't change. I started to look at different techniques and looked at neuroscience and psychology to find out what would make a difference. How can I look at the parts of our brain? What do we need to do so that we can get those parts into alignment? Neuro-emotional coaching combines executive coaching with neuroscience. It also pulls in psychology, kinesiology, and another technique called neuro-emotional technique. It's based on the premise that it's possible to change your response to circumstance. What I mean by that, it's actually possible for you to have a different emotional response to goals that you have, situations, to people, basically anything. In my experience, when I work with somebody and we can use neuro-emotional coaching, the client really receives huge benefits because we can look at their emotional intelligence. We can really lift it. We can look at the areas where somebody will get hijacked and really neutralize that by taking a deeper look. What type of people do I work with? I work with family businesses who struggle with their communication, and the past really gets in the way of them being clear and moving their business forward. I also work with sales professionals where their fear of rejection really gets in the way, and rather than going out and selling more, they service the clients, which is important, but it shouldn't take away from going out and producing more sales. I also work with people who, executives, people who struggle with public speaking. Let me give you an example. I work with a sales professional, and after we removed the fear of rejection, the person was able to bring up their sales by 30% because they no longer needed to procrastinate and avoid getting another no because they had enough rejection for that week. I also worked with an entrepreneur whose poor image of money really prevented him from raising his fees. When we neutralized his money concept, he quadrupled his salary. His company went up 4 times. How does it work? Muscle testing is a 2,000-year technique that comes to us from China. It's based on the premise that any muscle in your body will be stronger when you make a statement, when you think of something that is positive to you, it's your positive reality. And vice versa, when you make a statement that you don't believe in, that your muscle will be weaker. There are many studies that have been done around muscle testing. One is on my website by a psychiatrist named Dr. Daniel Monti, and you can look up what he found, and he really scientifically validated muscle testing. There are other studies out by Ann Jensen, the One Foundation, and I encourage you, if you'd like to learn more about it, to look them up. I would like to ask for a volunteer to come up so that I can demonstrate muscle testing. Who would like to volunteer? Great, come on up, thank you. Great, have you done muscle testing before?
No,
And remind me of your name?
it's Joyce.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to put your arm out in a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to put pressure on your wrist with my 2 fingers.
Okay.
So, and your job is going to be to resist me, and if you find that your arm is not as strong, just let it go down. There's no need for us to struggle about this or throw your neck into it. So let's just get a baseline. So let me see your arm. Okay, hold nice and strong. Okay, so can you see what happens when I push down on her wrist? Hold nice and strong. Yeah, her wrist naturally jumps back up. So that's how we construct it. This is what's called the bite of the muscle, and it's natural that the arm will bounce up. So before we can really get into it, we need to do a few steps. And one is to make sure that the body is really ready, sort of like when we start up the computer, the body is ready for muscle testing. So I'm going to ask you to just step forward on your left leg. Hold nice and strong. Okay, so I ask you to switch. Okay, perfect. So I didn't tell Joyce what the correct response was here. I didn't want her to know. But she had the correct response. When we hold out our, let's say, our left arm and we move forward with the right leg, the arm is supposed to be strong. That's how we walk. This is our flow, and vice versa. It needs to be weak. Repeat after me. My name is Joyce.
My name is Joyce.
My name is Jennifer.
My name is Jennifer.
Wow. Wait a minute. Let's do that again. My name is Joyce.
My name is Joyce.
My name is Jennifer.
My name is Jennifer.
What happened? What happened?
Well, my arm went down on the name that isn't mine.
Right. So we have a problem here, okay? It's a good problem to have. And the problem is that with a simple muscle test, we can really access our own reality. It's sort of like our own personal lie detector. When the arm is strong, it shows that this is our reality. We believe that statement, or it's a positive response. And when the arm goes down, it really means that that's not our reality. It shows up as a lie. So it's a good problem to have because it allows us to access our own reality. The way emotional coaching works is that we start off with statements. We start off with I am statements in order for us to see where our reality is. Oftentimes we have goals and we can't really figure out why we are not accomplishing our goals. And so this is a way for you to check. So what would you like to work on? What is a statement that might make sense for you?
So something around money. I'm not sure.
Okay, so
I find myself constantly checking my checkbook to see how much I have. It's like I'm afraid of running out.
okay. And is that actually a reality for you that you might run out?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not reality. It's just, I don't know what it is.
So let me just have you make some statements, and then we can kind of see what we want to work on.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with this. I'm okay with being wealthy.
I'm okay with being wealthy.
So it's not her reality. I'm okay with having $1 million.
I'm okay with having $1 million.
That's not her reality. I'm okay with living in poverty.
I'm okay with living in poverty.
Hold nice and strong. Yes. So thank you. So you can see that her reality, even though this is not really her reality internally is more comfortable with being in poverty And there's the need to look at the checkbook all the time. In order for us to kind of find out what part of the brain is involved here, I use the Meridian System. It's a 5,000-year-old system that comes to us from the Yellow Emperor, and it helps us categorize what might be triggered. So you don't really need to do anything. I'm going to muscle test you, and I'm going to just throw energetically the different areas at you. So kidney, hold nice and strong. I'm going to ask you to make the statement, I'm okay with making $1 million, while I test different categories.
I'm okay making $1 million.
Kidney, keep going.
I'm okay making $1 million.
Bladder.
I'm okay making $1 million.
Stomach.
I'm okay making $1 million.
Spleen. Keep going.
I'm okay making $1 million.
Thyroid. Okay, good. You can stop. So could you see that all of a sudden, as I was throwing things at her, that her arm changed, right? And it was became strong on thyroid. The next thing will be for us to explore a little bit what emotion is involved here. So just listen. You don't have to do much, because I am not interested in your neocortex. I don't want her to rationalize about this. I want to get into what's going on below the iceberg. So we have lost. Okay, so that was a instant hit. So the concept of you feeling lost. Okay, so her body's telling us that when she makes the statement, I'm okay with making $1 million, that what comes up is the feeling of feeling lost. So at this point, I'm going to ask you how you relate to this. How does this make sense?
Oh, it makes sense.
Can you say a few more things about it?
Sure. When I watch the Wheel of Fortune and those people win money, I always think, well, I wouldn't want to win that, because then I have to pay taxes on it, or some sort of negative thing comes up. What would I do with that money?
Okay, so feeling lost in terms of if I had this money, what would I do?
What would I do? How could I be a good steward? What would I do with this?
Okay, keep that in mind. Hold nice and strong. Yeah. So when the person talks about what they think is connected to this, then the arm will go down. So is there anything else? Let me see. The concept of the other things. No. So I told you earlier that the way we have emotions, it's really like it's a pattern, and they're reoccurring. So like the old record players, when the needle was kind of stuck, like we play the same song over and over again. This is how we experience emotions, how they occur for us. So most likely, this kind of pattern has been with you biochemically for a long time. So would you be willing to take a look at when did this start, or getting some more information about it?
Sure.
Okay. So the concept of the most original event where you felt lost, in a sense of if there was too much abundance, if you had more than you needed, that you kind of didn't know what to do with it. Hold nice and strong. When you were conception to 10. So we have the time of conception. We have conception to birth, birth to 5, 5 to 10. We have 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So again, I'm not asking her neocortex, her brain. Her body's telling us, when I was 8 years old, I was already experiencing this emotion of feeling lost around abundance. Anything that you would be willing to share with us, anything that you remember?
I'm not sure what happened at 8. We weren't living very well at the time.
So tell me a little bit about your family and your siblings. Where are you in the order?
I'm the oldest.
So you're the oldest, and how many other siblings?
I have a younger brother.
Okay. And how much younger is your brother?
3 years.
Okay, so and you were probably in 3rd grade?
Probably, although I guess, I'm not sure.
And what's going on at home? Both parents are working?
No, just my father was working. He worked in the steel mills.
Okay, your dad's working in the steel mills, and your brother is, so when you're 8, he's 5, so he's probably about to go to school.
Yeah, maybe.
And what's your mom doing?
I think she was just a homemaker. I don't remember.
Did she ever work?
She did work. She worked during the Korean War.
Okay. And how old were you during the Korean War?
I think I was 8.
Ah, okay. So this is the amazing thing that happened is that we don't really remember, but all of a sudden our body will put the dots together. So the concept of you feeling lost when your mom went to work, because whatever that comfort or whatever you were getting from your mom, you know, all of a sudden wasn't as available. Oh, nice and strong. So if we were in my office, we probably would take more time to really connect the dots. But we actually don't necessarily need to because the body is connecting. So at this point, we're going to do a clearing technique. And what I'd like you to do is just take your hand on your stomach, okay? And take your other hand on your forehead. Perfect. I'm going to like you to close your eyes and just take a deep breath. For those of you in the audience, I'd like you just to stay quiet. If you want to sort of vicariously participate in the exercise, you can. Just take one hand on your stomach, the other one on your forehead. So I'd like you to go back in time, see yourself as an 8-year-old, and just allow yourself to get in touch with that feeling of feeling lost. You know, mom went back to work, and she wasn't as available as she was before, and you just experienced that feeling of lost. You didn't really know, maybe you needed more emotional support, and it just wasn't available. So just be with that. Breathe into that. And once you're in touch with that, I'd like you to look at any judgments that you placed on that. Maybe you were judging her, maybe you were judging the situation, maybe you were judging that, you know, why did she have to go back to work? Why did we need that extra money? Why couldn't she just be available? I needed her. And so just inside yourself, complete those statements. I forgive myself for judging and whatever makes sense. Or I forgive myself for judging my mom. Or I forgive myself for judging that time period. Whatever comes to mind. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so in a second, we're going to muscle test Joyce again, and we're going to see if there's anything different about the muscle test. Okay, so here we go. Think about whatever you were thinking about. You're 8 years old, and your mom's going back to work. Oh, nice and strong. Wow, you're really strong. Really, really strong. Okay, look over there for me. Good. Awesome. And who remembered the statement? Right. I'm okay with making $1 million.
I'm okay with making $1 million.
Ooh, you're really strong in that. Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. So just very briefly, how do you feel?
It's sort of tingly, like alive.
Oh, okay.
Like more alive.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Let's give her a hand. I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of, the types of issues that we address with neuroemotional coaching. And on the board, I put individuals as well as teams. And you can see that it really applies to a variety of situations. Basically, what we're looking at is to change behavior. More specifically, sometimes we use this in the strategic planning process. I want to make sure that my client is congruent and tests positive on the goals that he or she is setting. We look at, we look at public speaking. We look at the self-image that you might have, your money concept. It addresses really many different things. For teams, often what happens is that the performance is improved because the communication is better. I take families on a retreat, or I take teams on a retreat, and we look at the emotional interaction that the team has. When there is what I would call static in the channel, we really need to make sure that that static is cleaned out, because then, only then, can the team really perform at the optimal level. These are just a few examples of the type of issues that I address. For those of you that recognize that there are certain situations where you do get emotionally hijacked, I really encourage you to consider this technique. Before I end today, I'd like you to take a few minutes to look at your takeaways. What did you learn today? What action steps are you willing to take? And lastly, what questions do I have? In closing, what did we cover? We looked at emotional intelligence. We looked at the definition. We looked at models. We got some more information of why it's important and what we can do about it to elevate it. We looked at the connection between leadership, our brain, and emotional intelligence. We learned about this idea of emotional hijacking, and we looked at 7 tips that would help us to have perhaps less emotional hijacking. And last but not least, I talked to you about neuroemotional coaching, what I call the ultimate prevention, and we had a volunteer who came up that allowed me to demonstrate the technique. Before I close, I would like to tell you a little story. For the story, I want you to imagine that you have a glass of water in your hand. So everybody get their glass of water and hold it out in front of them. So you're not having such a good day, and I'd like you to put some salt in your water. Just put the salt in there. And God, you just lost a customer, and I want you to put pepper in there. And maybe some vinegar. And then the IRS called and told you that there's something wrong with your taxes. Put it in there. And then your mother-in-law called, and she's upset with you. More stuff. Now I want you to swirl it around. Who would like to have a sip of this water? Nobody? Listen, there's nothing in your water. You put things in your water, but it was all in your imagination, and you had an emotional response to it. Be careful of what you put in your water. Make sure that you put only positive things in your water. Thank you so much for having me today.